The night was quiet, too quiet for a ruined outpost. Ethan Cole moved carefully through the broken corridors, the beam of his flashlight sweeping across walls burned black by old battles. He was a mechanic, not a soldier, but in this forgotten colony he had no choice but to act like both. Supplies were running low, the comms tower was still offline, and predators prowled in the dark. He carried only a wrench strapped to his belt and a small cutter, hardly enough to face the dangers of this place. Still, Ethan pushed forward. He had been searching for scraps of wiring when he heard it. A cry. At first he thought it was human, a small high-pitched scream echoing through the hallways. His chest tightened. Survivors? Could someone still be alive here? He followed the sound, moving faster now, boots crunching over shattered glass. The cry grew sharper, more desperate, and then he saw movement ahead. A small figure ran into the light of his beam. It was not human. The creature was childlike in size but alien in form. Its skin shimmered with faint silver patterns, its large dark eyes wide with fear. It stumbled on 3 legs, its fourth bent and bleeding. Behind it, shadows rushed forward, beasts with long jaws and spines along their backs, hunting in a pack. Ethan froze. His instincts screamed at him to run. These were not his people. This was not his fight, but the sound of the young one's cry cut through his fear. It was the same sound his little sister used to make when she was hurt. A sound of pure terror. The beasts lunged. Ethan acted. He charged forward, sliding between the young alien and its hunters. His flashlight swung wildly, catching the gleam of sharp teeth. He grabbed the wrench from his belt and swung with all his strength. The heavy steel cracked against a predator's jaw, sending it tumbling back with a howl. Another leapt. Ethan raised his arm. Pain ripped through him as claws slashed his jacket, but he held his ground. He shoved the beast away with his shoulder, his body shielding the alien child behind him. "Run!" he shouted, though he doubted the young one understood his words. Still, he pushed the child backward with his free hand while keeping himself between it and the predators. The pack circled. 3 of them now, their glowing eyes fixed on him. Ethan's breath came hard and fast. His mind told him this was madness, that he was only human, that he could not win. But his body refused to step aside. The first beast lunged again. Ethan swung his wrench, sparks flying as metal struck bone. He barely had time to turn before another slammed into him, knocking him to the floor. Teeth snapped inches from his face. With a desperate growl, Ethan jammed the cutter into its side. The beast shrieked and stumbled back, smoking where the blade burned into flesh. Ethan tried to stand, but his legs shook. Blood ran down his arm. The last predator crouched low, ready to strike. He thought this was the end. Then a new sound tore through the night. A roar. Powerful and furious. From the shadows stepped a tall figure, towering, graceful, and terrifying. The mother. Her skin glowed with the same silver patterns as the child's, but brighter, alive with energy. Her eyes burned like 2 dark suns. She raised her arm and light gathered there, forming into a weapon unlike anything Ethan had ever seen. The predators turned, but too late. With a single strike, she cut them down, their bodies falling silent. Ethan dropped to one knee, gasping, the wrench slipping from his hand. The alien mother moved forward, her gaze sharp, unreadable. She looked first to her child, who rushed to her side, trembling but alive. Then her eyes turned to Ethan. He expected death. Instead, she only stared, silent, watching. She had seen it all, how a human, a stranger, had risked everything to shield her young with nothing but his body and courage. And in that moment, something changed. The silence after the battle was heavy. Ethan stayed on one knee, gripping his bleeding arm. His heart hammered in his chest, but he forced himself not to move too quickly. The towering alien mother stood just a few steps away, her body glowing faintly in the darkness. Her child clung to her leg, whimpering softly. Ethan swallowed hard. He had no plan. He had acted on instinct, and now he was staring at a being who could end his life with a single strike. The mother tilted her head. Her eyes, deep and dark, seemed to pierce straight through him. For a long moment she did nothing, just studied him. Finally she spoke. The words were strange, layered with tones he could not understand. Her voice was sharp but not quite angry, more like questioning. Ethan raised his hand slowly. "I don't understand," he said. "I'm not your enemy." She narrowed her eyes. The child made a small sound, pointing back at the place where Ethan had stood against the predators. The mother's gaze shifted for just a second following the gesture. Ethan took that chance. He reached for his tool bag and pulled out a strip of cloth. His arm burned with pain, but he tied it tightly around the wound, trying to stop the bleeding. His movements were shaky but calm, showing her he was no threat. When he looked up again, the mother was still watching him. For the first time, Ethan noticed her expression was not pure anger. It was conflicted, like she was trying to understand him as much as he was trying to understand her. "I couldn't let them take the kid," he said quietly. His voice broke in the silence. "I've seen too much of that already. I couldn't stand by." Of course she didn't know his words, but maybe she felt his tone, the way his voice shook when he spoke of the child. The alien mother lowered her weapon. Slowly, Ethan let out a shaky breath he didn't realize he was holding. But the tension was not gone. She stepped closer, towering over him now. With one hand she reached down, not to strike but to touch his arm. Her long fingers brushed the cloth he had tied. She pressed lightly, testing the wound. Ethan winced but stayed still. She muttered something low, almost like a question. Ethan shook his head. "I don't know what you're saying." Her eyes narrowed. Then she turned to her child, knelt down and spoke softly in their strange tongue. The little one nodded, looking at Ethan with wide eyes. Then slowly, the child stepped forward. Ethan blinked. The young alien walked right up to him and reached out. Its hand, small and trembling, touched his chest right over his heart. It stayed there for a moment. Then it pulled back and whispered something. The mother's gaze hardened as if the child's words confirmed something important. She straightened again, taller, her silver markings glowing brighter. Ethan's pulse quickened. He felt the weight of her stare. Then, without warning, she spoke again. But this time the sound was different. She forced the words into something closer to his language, broken, harsh, but clear enough. "Why? Human save?" The question hit him harder than any claw or tooth. Why did he save her child? He opened his mouth, then closed it. How could he explain? How could he put into words something that had come from pure instinct? I couldn't let it happen," he said finally, voice rough. "No one should lose their kid. Not like that. Not while I can still stand." The mother's expression did not change, but her eyes seemed to soften, just slightly. She stepped back, motioning to her child. Together they moved toward the shadows of the ruined colony. Ethan thought they were leaving him. Relief washed over him. He had survived the night. But then she stopped. She turned her head, silver light tracing the sharp lines of her face, and she waited. Ethan realized with a chill that she was not leaving him behind. She was calling him to follow. Confused and bleeding, Ethan had no idea where this path would lead, but something in her eyes told him the choice had already been made. The night gave way to a pale dawn as Ethan followed the alien mother and her child through the ruins. His steps were slow, heavy with pain. The cut on his arm throbbed with every movement, but he pushed on. Something in the mother's gaze made it clear. She expected him to keep up. And strangely, he did. They moved with silent grace, climbing over broken walls and slipping through collapsed corridors. The child glanced back often, watching him. Its dark eyes were full of something Ethan couldn't name, curiosity, maybe even trust. When they finally reached a sheltered chamber deep within the colony, the mother stopped. The walls here glowed faintly, lit by patches of strange moss. Broken machines lay scattered across the floor, long dead. Ethan sank down against a wall, exhausted. He pressed his hand to his bandaged arm, wincing. The mother turned, standing tall before him. Her child stayed close to her leg, still trembling but safe. Ethan expected her to leave him there. Instead, she stepped forward. From a pouch at her side, she pulled out a small container. She opened it and a faint, sweet smell filled the air. Inside was a thick silver-blue paste. She knelt before him. Ethan stiffened. Instinct told him to pull back, but he didn't move. The mother dipped her fingers into the paste and gently pressed it onto his wound. The cool substance burned at first, then soothed, sinking into his skin. The pain eased. Ethan let out a shaky breath. "Thank you," he whispered. She did not answer. But her eyes stayed locked on his, and something in that silence felt heavier than words. When she finished, she stood again, her tall frame casting a shadow over him. She said something in her language, short, firm, almost like a declaration. The child repeated the word softly. Then both looked at Ethan. He frowned. What are you saying? The mother spoke again, this time slowly, her voice shaping into broken human words. You protect blood, Ethan blinked. I what? She placed her hand over the child's head. Her silver markings glowed faintly, tracing across her skin like living light. She looked back at Ethan. You claim. The word sent a chill down his spine. Ethan shook his head quickly. No, I didn't claim anyone. He stopped, struggling. How could he explain it had only been instinct, that he hadn't thought about customs or consequences? But to her it seemed clear. In her people's eyes, to shield a child with your own body was no small act. It was a binding act. The child stepped closer, touching Ethan's knee with its small hand. Claim, it repeated in a soft, uncertain voice. Ethan stared. His mouth went dry. The mother's gaze did not waver. She had already decided. Ethan leaned back against the wall, his thoughts racing. What did this mean? Claim? Family? Debt bond? He had no idea. All he knew was that he was caught in something far bigger than himself. He wanted to argue, to explain that he was only human, that he couldn't be part of their customs. But when he looked at the child's wide eyes, full of fragile trust, the words stuck in his throat. Instead, he sighed. All right, he muttered softly. If that's how you see it, then I guess I'm in. The mother's expression softened just slightly. She gave a short nod as if sealing the matter. It was done. The chamber fell into silence. The child curled up beside Ethan, its head resting lightly against his leg as though it had always belonged there. Ethan froze, startled by the sudden closeness. But after a moment he let it be. He stared at the ceiling, at the faint glow of moss above. His mind spun with questions. Why him? What would this mean when her people found out? What kind of trouble was he walking into? But another thought came, quieter, deeper. For the first time in years, he didn't feel completely alone. Ethan had thought the night in the ruins was the end of his troubles. He was wrong. By the second day, the alien mother led him and her child out of the crumbled colony and into the wide valley beyond. The land was strange and alive. Giant crystal trees rose from the ground like frozen lightning, and rivers of glowing water cut through the soil. The mother walked with steady steps, her child close by her side. Ethan followed behind, his injured arm wrapped in the glowing paste she had given him. The wound was already closing faster than it should have. They traveled for hours. At last, Ethan saw shapes in the distance, tall spires carved into the cliffs. Homes. A settlement. His stomach tightened. If one alien mother could frighten him, what would a whole city of them do? The settlement was alive with movement. Dozens of tall figures, all bearing the same glowing patterns, turned as the three entered. Their eyes fixed on Ethan immediately. The air grew heavy. Voices rose, sharp, questioning. He could not understand the words, but the tone was clear. Anger, suspicion, maybe even fear. The mother lifted her hand and spoke, her voice firm and commanding. The crowd quieted, though their stares did not soften. Ethan kept his head low. His instincts screamed at him to run, but he stayed close to the mother and child. They brought him into a wide hall carved from the cliff itself. Strange symbols glowed faintly on the walls. Inside, more aliens gathered, their voices echoing in the chamber. At the far end stood figures draped in long garments, their markings brighter, their eyes sharper. Leaders, maybe. The mother bowed her head slightly, then spoke in her flowing language. Ethan caught only fragments, her voice strong, her hand pointing toward him, then to her child. The leaders frowned. Their eyes turned on Ethan. He felt the weight of their judgment pressing down on him. One of them stepped forward, tall and cold. He spoke in broken human words, each syllable rough, human. Why here? Ethan licked his dry lips. I didn't come here on purpose. I was stranded. I just helped the kid. The alien's eyes narrowed. Help or harm? Which true? Before Ethan could answer, the child rushed forward. It stood in front of him, arms spread wide, speaking fast and desperate in its own tongue. Its little voice shook with emotion. The hall fell silent. The leaders looked at the mother, then back at Ethan. Something unspoken passed between them all. At last, the one who had spoken gave a short nod. But his eyes still burned with suspicion. The mother placed her hand firmly on Ethan's shoulder. She spoke one word, clear and strong. Claim. The reaction was instant. Gasps filled the hall. Voices rose again, louder this time, filled with shock and outrage. Ethan's blood ran cold. He didn't need to know the language to understand. She had declared him as part of her family. The leaders argued, their voices like thunder. Some pointed at Ethan, others at the child. He stood frozen, caught between fear and disbelief. Finally, the noise settled. The leader who had spoken before gave Ethan one long, hard look. Then he turned and spoke in a slow, deliberate tone. Human. Not welcome. Dangerous. But chosen. He pointed toward the mother. Her choice. Her burden. The mother nodded firmly, her silver patterns glowing brighter, as if to show her defiance. The meeting ended, but the stares did not. As Ethan left the hall, guided by the mother, he felt eyes following him, full of distrust and anger. Outside, the child grabbed his hand. Its small fingers curled tightly around his. Ethan looked down at it, his chest heavy with confusion. He had only wanted to save a life. But now he was tied to something far greater. A whole world watched him with suspicion. A whole people judged him as a threat. And yet, when the mother walked beside him, her tall frame strong and unwavering, he felt a strange sense of protection. He was caught between two worlds. Neither fully trusted him, neither fully welcomed him, but he was no longer alone. The days that followed were heavy with silence. Ethan stayed close to the alien mother and her child. The settlement allowed him to remain only because of her claim, but the stares never stopped. Every time he walked through the carved halls, he felt dozens of eyes on him. Sharp, cold, suspicious. Whispers followed in a language he didn't know. Some aliens turned away when he passed. Others spat words at him, their voices hard and bitter. He understood enough. They wanted him gone. The mother, Zayara, he had learned her name from the child, stood by him always. Her tall frame, her steady presence, kept the others from doing more than glare. The child clung to Ethan often, small hand wrapped around his fingers, as if it had already chosen him. Still, the weight of their distrust pressed on him, until the night the danger returned. It began with a low rumble in the valley. Ethan thought it was thunder at first, but the sky was clear. Then the sound grew louder, sharper, engines. He hurried outside with others. In the distance, shadows swept across the horizon. Not beasts this time, ships, raiders, the aliens shouted, their voices filled with alarm. Defenses lit up across the settlement. Energy shields, heavy cannons carved into the cliffs. But when the first blast struck, the truth became clear. The defenses were old, many broken, many never repaired. The shields flickered. Cannons failed to fire. Panic rippled through the people. Ethan's heart pounded. He recognized the ships. Human design, but not colony vessels. Raiders, smugglers, the kind who tore apart settlements for supplies, leaving nothing but ashes. The aliens had no chance unless someone fixed the defenses, and Ethan was a mechanic. He turned to Zayara. I can help. I know these systems. I've worked on them before. She stared at him, her markings glowing faintly, unreadable. Then she gave a single sharp nod. That was all he needed. He ran toward the nearest defense station. Inside, sparks flew from broken panels. Circuits smoked. The alien guards there shouted at him, blocking his way. Their eyes blazed with distrust. I can fix it, Ethan shouted, pointing at the controls. Let me through. They snarled in their own tongue, shaking their heads. Then Zayara arrived. She stepped between them, her tall frame casting a shadow across the room. With a single word, firm, commanding, she pushed them aside. Ethan dropped to his knees by the broken panel, pulling tools from his bag. His hands shook, but his mind was clear. Wires, coils, fuses, human tech mixed with alien design. He had only minutes before the raiders broke through. He worked fast. Sparks burned his skin. His arm throbbed where the wound still healed, but he ignored it. Sweat dripped into his eyes as he reconnected circuits, bypassed dead relays, and forced the old system to life. The station shook as another blast hit the cliff. Ethan gritted his teeth, slammed the last connection in place, and pulled the lever. The cannon roared to life. Light exploded from the cliffside, striking one of the raider ships and tearing it apart in the sky. Cheers rose behind him. Ethan staggered back, gasping for air. But there was no time to rest. He rushed to the next station with Zayara and her child close behind. Again, he worked. Again, the cannons came alive. By the time the raiders broke through the clouds, half the defenses were firing. Energy bolts filled the sky. Ships burst into flames, crashing into the valley below. The raiders tried to push closer, but the cannons tore them apart. At last, the survivors fled, their engines burning trails of light across the horizon. Silence fell. The settlement stood, shaken but alive. Ethan sank to the ground, his body aching, his hands black with ash. He looked up at the aliens gathered around him. For the first time, their eyes were not full of anger. They were full of something else: respect. The child ran to him, wrapping its arms around his neck. Zayara stood behind, her gaze steady, her markings glowing brighter than ever. In the eyes of her people, Ethan was still human, still an outsider. But after this night, he was no longer seen as weak. He had saved them, and though many would not admit it aloud, they could no longer deny the truth. The alien mother had chosen well. The days after the raid were different. Ethan felt it the moment he stepped out into the valley. The stares had changed. No longer only suspicion. Some eyes carried something new, respect, maybe even gratitude. Others still glared with anger, but quieter now, as if their voices had been forced down. The cannons still smoked from the battle, but the settlement still stood. And they all knew the reason. A human Zayara never left his side. Her child clung to him openly now, walking with its small hand in his, unafraid of what others thought. But tension grew thicker each day. Ethan felt it in every glance, every whisper. Something was building, something he didn't yet understand. He found out when Zayara led him back into the great hall. The leaders were waiting. Their glowing markings burned bright in the dim chamber, their tall frames rigid with authority. Dozens of others crowded the edges, watching in silence. Ethan's stomach turned. He had no idea why he was here. Zayara stepped forward, her presence calm but commanding. She spoke in her people's language, her voice carrying strong and clear. Ethan caught only fragments, but the way the crowd shifted told him it was serious. Then she turned. She placed her hand firmly on Ethan's shoulder. Her eyes locked with the leaders, and she spoke one word: claim. The chamber erupted. Voices clashed like thunder, some shouting in outrage, others gasping in disbelief. The leaders raised their arms, trying to calm the storm, but the crowd would not quiet. Ethan froze. His chest tightened. He understood enough. This wasn't like before. She wasn't just saying it privately to him or quietly among her people. She was declaring it publicly. Before everyone, Zayara had claimed him, not just as a savior of her child, but as family. One of the leaders stepped forward, his eyes blazing. He spoke harshly, pointing at Ethan. The words were foreign, but the meaning was clear. Unworthy, outsider, human. Zayara's markings flared bright, glowing across her arms and face. Her voice cut through the hall like a blade. She stood tall, defiant, daring anyone to challenge her. The child ran forward, clutching Ethan's leg. It spoke quickly, its small voice desperate, pleading. Ethan looked down at it, then back at the furious crowd. His throat was dry. His mind spun. He had never asked for this. He had never wanted to be part of alien customs or politics. He had only wanted to help, to save a life. And now he stood at the center of a storm that could tear him apart. The leader turned on him suddenly, speaking broken human words. Human. Do you accept or deny? The question hit him like a blow. If he denied it, maybe they would let him leave. Maybe the whispers and glares would fade. But if he walked away now, what would it mean for Zayara? For her child, who clung to him as if he were already part of their blood. He looked into the child's wide eyes, trusting, fragile. He thought of the night in the ruins, of the cry that had driven him forward, of the moment he had chosen to stand. And he knew the answer. Ethan raised his head. His voice was steady, though his heart pounded. I accept. The hall fell silent. Gasps echoed through the chamber. Some stared in shock, others in fury. The leader's jaw tightened, his markings flaring with anger. But Zayara's eyes softened just for a moment. She gave a small nod, as if she had expected nothing less. The child smiled, its small hand gripping Ethan's tighter than ever. The leaders turned, speaking fiercely among themselves. At last, the one in front pointed at Ethan again. Her claim, her risk, her choice. The words were bitter, but final. The crowd slowly dispersed, though many left with glares and whispers of discontent. When the hall was empty, Ethan slumped against the wall, his legs weak. His heart still raced from what he had just done. Zayara stood beside him, silent but strong. She didn't need words. The bond had been sealed, and she knew it. Ethan looked at her, then at the child resting against him. His world had changed forever. He was no longer just a man stranded among strangers. He was claimed. The decision could not be undone. Ethan felt the weight of it every moment after that night in the Great Hall. Some of Zayara's people greeted him with quiet respect now. Others refused to even look at him. He had become something they had never seen before, an outsider who was no longer outsider, a human claimed as kin. The child no longer hid behind its mother. It walked proudly at Ethan's side, holding his hand as if the entire world had been remade. And maybe it had, but whispers traveled fast. Beyond the valley, the story spread. Other clans heard of the claim. Some called it an insult to their traditions. Others feared it meant humans and aliens would mix, breaking apart the old ways. And then the humans came. It started with a signal from the sky, a human patrol ship orbiting low. Ethan had always known they would find him one day. But when the dropships landed on the far ridge, his chest tightened. He saw the soldiers in their armor, carrying the same weapons he once trusted, the same flag stitched to their shoulders. His own people. The commander approached, visor gleaming, voice sharp through the speaker. "Ethan Cole," she said, "you've been reported missing. We're here to bring you home. Home." The word should have filled him with relief, but now it only twisted his heart. He wasn't sure where home was anymore. Zayara stood tall beside him, her markings glowing with warning. Her warriors formed a wall behind her, weapons ready. The child pressed close against Ethan, afraid. The commander's gaze shifted, landing on Zayara and the child. Then back to Ethan. "What is this?" she asked. "You're protecting them?" Ethan's mouth went dry. He could feel the eyes of both sides burning into him, waiting. He had to choose again. If he went with the humans, maybe his life would return to what it once was. But the thought of leaving Zayara and her child, the thought of breaking the bond he had sworn, felt like tearing out a piece of his own soul. He stepped forward, his voice steady. "I made a choice," he said. "I'm part of them now. They're my family." The words hung heavy in the air. The commander's eyes narrowed. "You've gone native. You've betrayed your people." Ethan shook his head. "No, I'm saving them. The same way I saved the child. That's what humans do. That's what we're supposed to do." For a long moment, there was only silence. Soldiers shifted uneasily. Alien warriors tensed, waiting for the fight to explode. But then, the child did something no one expected. It stepped out from behind Ethan. Small, fragile, unarmed, it raised its hands toward the commander. Its voice trembled, speaking in broken human words Ethan had taught it. "Family." The soldiers froze. The commander's visor tilted slightly, as if struck by something she could not explain. The battlefield did not erupt. No weapons fired. For the first time, the tension broke not with violence, but with a single word spoken by a child. The commander lowered her weapon. Slowly, carefully, she turned back toward her troops. "Stand down," she said. Relief washed over Ethan so strongly his knees nearly buckled. The soldiers withdrew. The alien warriors did not chase them, for now the war had paused. Not ended, but paused. That night, the valley held its breath. Fires burned low, and for the first time in weeks, no alarms sounded. Ethan sat outside with Zayara and her child. Stars stretched endlessly overhead, the same stars he had once looked at from Earth, dreaming of adventure. Zayara spoke softly, her voice like the low hum of the night. Ethan didn't understand all the words, but he didn't need to. He understood the meaning. Gratitude, respect, trust. The child curled against him, drifting to sleep. Ethan looked down at its peaceful face, then up at the stars again. He had not planned this. He had not asked for it, but sometimes destiny did not ask. Sometimes it simply chose, and Ethan had chosen too. He was no longer just a stranded soldier, no longer just a human in a strange land. He was the bridge between two worlds, claimed not by blood, but by sacrifice, by loyalty, by love. Years later, they would tell stories of that night, how a human stood unarmed between armies, how a child's voice ended the fight, how one choice changed the path of two species. They would call him traitor. They would call him savior. But to Ziara and to the child who held his hand, he was only one thing: family.